Need help recording audio from your Nano Cortex to a DAW? Let's go check out how to do it. All right, so let's get you started working with your Nano Cortex and routing that beautiful music you're making into a DAW and doing some capture work. I'm going to do my best to be as quick and painless as I can with this. I want it to be as simple as possible. I'm going to be using Mac OS today with Logic Pro. I know there's plenty of other DAWs out there. I know there's plenty of Windows users as well. No hate whatsoever for me. I just prefer Mac when it comes to my studio setup. So I'm going to walk through Logic Pro. There might be a couple of slight deviations when it comes maybe to the later portions of talking about MIDI and such, but for the most part, just standard getting you started is going to be just about the same in any DAW. I really don't think you're going to have that many problems, but at any rate, I want to walk through a couple prereqs really quick just to advise you, and then you can jump right into to getting this going. You know, we'll do a couple of tests on the guitar, playing some chords and whatnot, do some capture. And yeah, I'll end that all by showing you just a taste of being able to send MIDI commands from your DAW to the Nano Cortex and actually making a couple of preset changes. Okay, just to get you started. I don't want to go into too much depth there. I want to keep this video as targeted as I can on just showing you how to start capturing audio quickly. Okay, so really quick with USB audio. So the Nano Cortex is using USB 2.0. It's 24-bit and 48 kilohertz fixed with its low latency audio interface. Okay, so for both Windows and Mac, same thing. It's fixed at 48, so there's no changing that configuration at all. So one of the things that I will say is if you are running Mac OS, you simply are going to take that USB-C cable and plug it into your system. Okay, now if you have an older Mac that doesn't have Thunderbolt or USB-C, you're more than likely going to need a USB-A to USB-C adapter. So do keep that in mind, because the USB-C cable that comes in the box with the Nano Cortex is C to C. It's not C to A. Okay, so if you don't have USB-C on your computer to plug this in, you're going to need that adapter. You can get any of this off of Amazon. In fact, I'll leave a link one if that helps you, just in case you run into that. As far as Mac OS, there's no prereqs to get started, okay? Your system's going to see the Nano Cortex as an audio interface and be able to work right out of the box. There's not going to be any drivers or software or anything else you need to install. If you are running Windows, however, you are going to need to install an ASIO driver in order to be able to use the Nano Cortex as an audio interface. I'm going to allow for this to be on the screen for just a minute. You can follow the doc right here. I'll just pause the video, take a look at it. You can get that link, you can get it installed and make it go. But I'm going to keep moving on. So if you need those directions on how to get that ASIO driver installed, just pause the video here and get that going. So now that I'm going to assume that if you're on a Windows, you're running your ASIO driver and everything's good to go there. If you're Mac, don't need to do anything. Don't worry about it. The last thing I want to do is talk about prereqs of USB channels. Let's now take a look at the USB channels that are going to be available using your Nano Cortex as an audio interface. You're going to have a total of 4 inputs and 3 outputs. Now, if you're not too familiar with audio interfaces, you might say, well, what do you mean? That doesn't line up with the actual physical interfaces that are on the device, right? You only have technically 1 instrument interface and you technically only have 2 outputs that you can send audio to. What's going on here? Well, these are different variations of usage for those. So first and foremost, input 1 is going to be your instrument's dry input, your DI signal. Okay, so if you set input 1 as what you're catching from the Nano Cortex, you're going to catch that DI. You're going to hear just what your guitar sounds like when you're strumming it without any of the processing done. Okay, so you're not going to hear neural captures, cabinets, effects, anything. It's just going to be your guitar. This is really handy. If you're, again, not too familiar with DAWs, there's a lot you can do with DI, and it's a really good idea, especially to capture both DI and wet signals, as we call it, or processed signals, because you can always reuse them and you can layer them too. There's a lot of things you can do there. I always, now that I've gotten a lot more familiar with working with DAWs and kind of doing this, I always, if I'm, say, for example, recording from the Quad Cortex, capturing DI and wet signals, simply because I can layer them any way I want. And if I ever want to reamp, as they call it, that DI signal, put it through, say, a different plugin, or replay it through the Quad Cortex, doing something entirely different with a different preset set up in the whole 9 yards, you can do that. So you can basically save your performance for later and do whatever you want to, and you can send it back through and process it any way you like. So keeping DI is always a really good idea, in my opinion. Anyways, input 1 is going to get you your DI. Input 2 is actually going to be that capture interface on the side. And they say selecting 1 and 2 on your DAW to record DI signal is what you should do. But technically, your signal is going to be coming in from your instrument input. But if you do use capture input, that is going to be input 2. So technically, you can use that as a secondary input if you're going to be using the device as an audio interface, okay? Inputs 3 and 4 are going to be output left and output right. So output 1, output 2, left, right, is going to be input 3 and input 4. This is going to get you your processed signal. So if you select inputs 3 and 4 together, you're going to have that stereo output that you're going to be able to capture into your DAW when you're doing your recording. Okay, so that's going to be what's considered your stereo wet signal. Now, outputs 1 is going to be playback through the host. So that's basically, it's going to be outputs 1 left and 2 right put together into a stereo connection that's going to be just output 1. Okay, so if you need to send to something else, so sending back to the Nano Cortex, that's what you're going to be doing with these outputs. Output 2 selects outputs 1 and 2 on your host to hear playback through the Cortex. So that means that things that you're playing on your host system, say for example, if you're playing something back off of your DAW, okay, that output will actually now send through your Nano Cortex. So let's look at a scenario. Say you have output 2 with a stereo cable going out to an FR cabinet or something similar. You could play your audio from your DAW out through the Nano Cortex to that FR speaker and actually hear what that sounds like through that speaker. That's just one of the many scenarios you could use that for, but that's basically what that output is going to do. And then finally, output 3 is going to be used for your DAW to reamp audio tracks through the Nano Cortex. So say in the example that I was saying, if you have a captured DI and you wanted to send it back through the Nano Cortex to get reprocessed and then capture back out, output 3 is what will allow for you to do that. Now I'm going to go through just showing you opening the DAW, in this case, like I mentioned earlier, Logic Pro. I'm going to show you setting your inputs and outputs. I'll show you a couple of scenarios and being able to capture, play a little bit of guitar through just so you can hear some playback. And then finally, we'll wrap up by showing you a basic introduction to MIDI controlling the Nano Cortex from your DAW. Again, I'm not going to get too wild and crazy with MIDI. I don't think it's necessary with this device really, but I'm going to at least show you how to get started, and you can kind of deep dive from there. And if folks want it, maybe I'll go and make a video in the future on that part. At any rate, let's go ahead and get started taking a look at how to capture audio in our DAW. So I have a new session of Logic Pro open here. We're going to make an empty project. I'm going to set my input device as the Nano Cortex. My output device, I have many different versions of things here for obviously much recording that I do. In this case, M6 is going to be my other audio interface that has my studio monitors attached to it. Okay, this could just as easily be, I don't know, just MacBook Pro speakers even, and they would just play through those speakers. So whatever your scenario is for audio output, just make sure you have that selected here, so that way you're going to be able to hear yourself and be able to do that. If you're using studio, headphones or something like that too, whatever that interface is, make sure that that's selected as your output device. Input though, you definitely want it to be Nano Cortex. So let's go ahead and choose, and here we go. And finally, you have a couple of options that are going to come up here. So I'm going to start with input 1. If you think back to what I was just describing to you for the setup on the 4 inputs that the Nano Cortex has, input 1 is going to be your instrument DI signal. Okay, so we're going to start there, and then I'll show you how to then get into recording wet signal as well. Output is going to be outputs 1 and 2, and that's just going to be going to my studio interface, as I mentioned earlier. So that's simply just going to give me stereo output through my monitors while I'm playing. Okay, so I'm going to hit create. I'm going to close this just so I can see a little better. And I'm also going to pop up the mixer down at the bottom here so we can see a little bit more about what's happening. All right, so pick up my guitar. My guitar, actually, I should tell you really quick the setup. So I simply just have a USB cable going from the back of the Nano Cortex into my laptop. I have a TRS cable going from my guitar's input to the Nano Cortex input, and that's it. There's nothing else. Okay. Let's go ahead and pick up the guitar. So that is my guitar's DI signal. So as I mentioned, this isn't processed. So nothing is going through any of the presets, neural captures, effects, or anything. This is simply channel 1, which is giving me my DI dry signal of my guitar. So if I wanted to just record that's all I have to do. I'm ready to go. I can simply hit record. Here, let me just make a change here so I have my metronome go. So there you go. That is a DI capture, okay? So I fully captured my DI. Now let's say, all right, we want to go a step further. We want to capture the wet processed signal of the guitar and what's going on, okay? And we are going to do that by creating a new audio track. In fact, I'm going to rename this just so we keep things clear. Guitar DI. Guitar wet. You know what? Let's, just in case you're not familiar with that term, let's go guitar processed. Maybe that'll make it a little easier. Okay. So we are going to use, click on the I, which is basically going to be being able to hear the interface as it's playing live. It's a monitor. Okay. So I'm going to set this to monitor. I'm also going to set it to record. So I'm going to arm this track for recording. So that way, when we go to check this out and record in just a moment, we'll be able to actually capture the output. All right, so now I'm going to go to 3. And in fact, you know what? Let's go 3. Nah, 3's fine. 3's fine, because I don't really care about having stereo right now. If you wanted stereo, you would just simply select that in pairing here. So you could actually click right here and go 3 and 4. That's fine. I'll leave it 3 and 4. I'm sorry, I'm over describing a little bit of that. But yeah, let's go 3 and 4. So that way you're going to have that stereo output processed signal from the Nano Cortex. Okay, so. We've now captured a track playing some DI, and we've also captured a track with processed output 3 and 4 signal, and their input 3 and 4 signal, I'm sorry. So great. Okay, now let's delete what I just created. And let's set this up so that we can capture both our DI and our processed guitar here. So I'm actually going to set both of these to be armed. I only want to hear the monitor of the process, so that way I don't get confused on what I'm hearing. And let's go ahead and capture both, okay? So now we will get ready for playback. And I am going to allow for both the DI and process signal to play at the same time. And just to make sure you're understanding what you're hearing between the two, I'm going to solo just the DI. And now I will solo just the wet. There you have it. We have recorded both DI and process signals from the Nano Cortex into our DAW. All right, now a brief introduction to sending MIDI command signals to your Nano Cortex from your DAW. It's a very simple scenario that I want to set up, and that's simply going to be, I have a audio track here that's going to be playing the processed output that I'm going to be playing on the guitar. I'm going to program a couple of preset changes, one being on a clean preset, another being on a distorted preset. And I'm just going to start strumming. And as we are playing these MIDI signals out from the DAW, you're going to hear that I'm making changes to presets without any touching of the Nano Cortex itself. It's simply going to be coming from MIDI signals that I'm sending through the USB to the Nano Cortex. Okay? So it's the simplest scenario that I can think of to kind of demonstrate to you sending MIDI signals directly via USB to the Nano Cortex. So we have our audio track here set to basically play stereo 3 and 4 for the processed signal of the guitar, okay? And I'm going to right click on the lane track right here. I'm going to create a new external MIDI track. There it is. I'm now going to set the source for the Nano Cortex. You can go channel 1 to channel 16. It doesn't matter. It's listening on all channels. So any of those commands that you're going to send are going to hit any channel 1 through 16. Okay, so now that we have this created, we're going to go ahead and right click here on the track lane, and I'm going to create a new MIDI region. And I'm going to double click on that and then go to command signal here. And now we are going to add a program change, okay? And I am going to select 2. So that's going to be the equivalent. 0 is your first of 25 presets, okay? So selecting 2 is technically going to be the third preset that I'm going to select for this change, okay? So in this particular MIDI region that I just created, this is going to send a signal on channel 1 to the Nano Cortex, telling it I want a program change of CC command control channel 2, which is essentially going to say, okay, I want the third preset that is configured on the Nano Cortex. I'm then going to go here and I'm going to create new MIDI region again. And I'm going to do another program change. And you'll notice position 312 is the same place that I have this MIDI region, okay? So if I go back to this first one, we see that's position 111, which is the very beginning of the playhead right here on the track, okay? And it's sending that program channel signal up 2 that I just mentioned. I'm going to click on this one and it's duplicating and saying the same thing. So I'm going to hit the drop down here. And instead, I'm going to go to something like, let's say 19. So this should be into that fourth bank and give me something that's in distorted, right? So that way I can have a clean preset towards the beginning of that first bank, which will be in this section. And then I'm going to have a distorted preset that we're going to use for this part of the channel. Now I'm going to set this to loop. So as I'm going to be playing and strumming with the guitar, it's going to play through to this area of the playhead, and then it's going to loop back and start over again. Each time it does this, you should hear a change in preset. At this section, as soon as we hit the beginning of this MIDI block, MIDI region block, you're going to hear that clean channel preset kick in, okay? And then once we reach the beginning of part 3 here of the playhead, you're going to then have a distorted preset start. And then once we loop back, you'll hear the whole thing happen over again. So let me go ahead and grab my guitar. Pretty cool, huh? So that's the easiest way that I could think to be able to demonstrate to you using MIDI to send signals to the Nano Cortex in order to be able to, in this case, change presets. I'm actually not familiar with other MIDI codes that are available besides changing presets at this point. I'm not really quite sure, and it's not seemingly documented in the guide that I've looked at so far to tell me there's anything else that you can control with MIDI. I'm kind of having a hard time believing that, though, so I am going to do my own due diligence and try to dig into that a little bit further throughout the course of the next couple of weeks with the device and just figure out what I can see. I really am having a hard time believing that there wouldn't be some kind of MIDI command to say, bring up the tuner or turn it off or do things like that. Like, those are kind of quality of life things that I would heavily expect the device to do. But at this point, I only know about presets. So I've now shown you at least how to be able to send preset changes using MIDI over the USB cable from your DAW. There you have it, a quick and dirty example of recording your Nano Cortex to a DAW and being able to capture DI, being able to capture the process signal, being able to send MIDI signals by USB to the device to do some control changes from your DAW. Lots of different things. I tried to give as much concise information as I could. If you've got any other questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to be able to talk to you more about this. I probably will be making a couple more advanced videos as well to get a little bit further into recording methodologies with the Nano Cortex and the Quad Cortex and doing some of that soon. So be on the lookout for that. But in the time being, I hope this was informative for you and at least got you started in being able to capture audio quickly using your new Nano Cortex. Till next time, see ya.